STEM VR. There was
Hmm.
this technical presentation, and Amp walked over to me after the presentation as I was looking at like one of the demos and everything that had been done, and said, "Hey, we have a group called Transhumanists in VR. Why don't you tag along?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, why not?" Yeah. So that's my story.
Fascinating. So just follow the dog, I guess.
Exactly.
So, so how is this different from medicine or regular technology?
I
Did
can I can at
did
least
you did you come up with one for this?
I came up with a very brief one which you can stop me if I'm stealing from you, but like when we're looking at when we're looking at things like technologies, I'm going to take medicine specifically as an example. Medicine is something the common approach is treating problems. Is we have things like disease and other issues, and we want medicine to address those problems as they pop up. Where the transhumanist angle is like, well, things like aging we see as a problem, or even like why are we simply trying to address what we see as like initial problems just to restore to like a baseline human state? Why can't we go further? Which is where we get into things like cybernetics and augmentation. Like, why is our view of like a standard person, a human, why is that our like baseline or end goal? Why shouldn't we think higher, go beyond that? That's one angle where the transhumanist differs. The transhumanist perspective differs.
Thank you. JC, did you have anything to add on to that one?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I had some examples, but yeah, the big one is that medicine is very much they're only interested in alleviating suffering insofar as it gets you to be normal. It's very much, well, because they've already got so much complexity to work with. They're like, we are trying to save lives, and that in and of itself is already such a hard task that they can't really afford to do anything else. But when it's like, if your mindset is do no harm, then you're also kind of constrained in that if you want to do something that involves trade-offs or involves risks that you otherwise should be able to do, it's like, well, I don't know, like maybe I don't like dysphoria is a really good example, right? From a medical model, treating dysphoria with transition makes perfect sense. But there's so much more to gender expression than just not being dysphoric. There's this whole space of just like exploring what I can, exploring how I can present myself. Maybe there's euphoria in there. Maybe I feel better than not bad, right? And like, if you take that idea and you bring it to everything, well, then all of a sudden a medical doctor is not going to agree to put that weird little chip implant that vibrates and gives you a new sense in your skin, because they're out to do no harm. And even though you may get something immensely beneficial out of that, they're interested in not doing any harm, not necessarily harm reduction or cost benefit trade-offs, insofar as that original limiting principle exists. That's probably the biggest difference.
A lot of it is
Thank
handing
you so
over
much.
My apologies.
You're perfect. Go ahead.
A lot of it is handing over the decision to the individual. So, whereas medicine views it as the perspective of there is something medically wrong here, not can we improve this condition and everything, it also leaves a lot of that onus on the medical system itself to make that decision. A lot of transhumanism and a lot of that aspect of improving yourself is based on your decision. It's based on, obviously within reason here, but it's based on what you feel would be best for you specifically.
Thank you. So, is this upgrade in humanity if it's going beyond just treating people?
In some sense it is. Like, there are the people who argue that we have humans and the next step would be transhumans or even post-humans. Like, are we inventing an entirely different species? And I want to kind of sidebar this it is tangentially related, but focus on the concept of things like individualism and morphological freedom. And the transhumanist perspective is very clear on emphasizing that it is entirely by choice. Sometimes there are concerns brought to transhumanists of like, oh, are you trying to like genetically engineer a better race, and like what happens to the other people? And the transhumanist is like, the transhumanist perspective tries to be very clear on like it is entirely individual choice, like whether you want to take what you see as an upgrade, and then what, you know, how upgrades that you would want to choose. So I guess like to answer the question, like, yeah, it is like a step above, like, you know, we're trying to take control of our own evolution and evolve beyond our natural biological limitations, but
Yeah, I can elaborate on some of the background behind that, actually, because like if you look at the early movement, especially if you were around for it, it very heavily imports from like Enlightenment era liberalism and rationalism. And so like if you think about it in that context, when you ask the question what counts as an upgrade, the only sort of solution you come to that doesn't have some sort of logical paradox in it is you have to let individuals choose for themselves. Because, for example, if you thought something was an upgrade and I didn't, and I tried deciding for you, then that would mean that somebody else could decide for me, and then obviously I wouldn't like that because what they decide will not count as an upgrade to me anyways. And so that whole notion of like society pressuring you and telling you what you have to be, like it doesn't check out. It's paradoxical. It doesn't make sense. And so like that's why like the idea of morphological freedom found such heavy influence in the early movement, but also just because like it kind of makes sense, right? Like you look at anywhere in the world today where other people are defining acceptable limitations for what other people can do with their bodies, and it's always just awful. So like, yeah, that's more of the background on that.
Thank you.
I actually don't have much to add on that. I think she wrapped it up pretty well.
All right, perfect. So touching on morphological freedom, you just brought that up. What about body modification and morphological freedom?
I'm a very big fan of those things. No, one of the questions I do like pose actually whenever there are a bunch of people around and the subject of transhumanism comes up is I just like to ask, like, within the bounds of the laws of physics, like what would you be if you could be anything? And like that seems to get people thinking, and I just think it's a really good thought exercise, right? Like get out of some of those bubbles you may have, some preconceived notions, just really go nuts with it.
Would either of you like to touch on that? Alright. Perfect. Alright. So you said, what would you be if you could be anything you wanted to be? I think that it's really relevant to us here in the trans community as well. But could anyone possibly go into more detail? What parallels does transhumanism have with being trans?
Go first. It would be funny.
What? Oh, well,
Never mind.
I don't know. I can make the, you know, I tell people frequently, like, I'm a transhumanist, and I'm a transhumanist. So, I just really heavily hitting home the morphological freedom point. Like, we're already on the path of wanting to change our own bodies, so
Right.
why, you know, obviously many of us are trying to do that through an idea of through things like hormones and other surgeries, but we still have like a potential human baseline in mind with a lot of that. And so it's like, why not go further? Why not think about different limitations, other embeddable tech and other things? And I mean, even VR is a pretty solid integration. Like, as we have these compute devices on our heads, like getting smaller and more accessible and such, like, and being on a platform where you can literally choose any form you want to be, like, it really hammers that point home, I think.
Thank you so much. You mentioned. Does anyone else want to answer that before?
I've got a really
Alright.
long one, but I think Random should.
Go for
I
it.
think- All right. Let's see. So I'd say the big one is the process of self-creation and self-improvement, right? Like when I use hormone replacement therapy to soften my skin and change my form, or when I eventually get, feminization surgery on my face, like I'm already modifying myself to be more comfy, but I'm also envisioning future or ideal versions of myself and going through the challenge of making that real. So it's very much like it's like an Enlightenment era ideal, or even earlier than that, like really old school philosophy. You find people going on about how a person should be self-made, they should be independent, they should craft themselves, and what was it? Plato had the bit about obviously it's ancient times, so it was very masculine, but he was going on about how it would be a great shame for a man to die without seeing the beautiful things his body is capable of, and I'm just giggling at that in like a modern trans context. And there's also more to it than just self-improving. Like, I'm sure all of us have seen the guides that well, this is instrumental to self-improvement. Like, I'm sure we've all seen the guides that other people make. Some kind soul will go through the effort to make, like, a transition guide. It's like, here are what these hormones do. Here are where you can find them. Here's how you feminize your voice. All this cool stuff. And, like, so you can do more than just improve yourself. You can contribute to the greater project of doing this while still doing it from a perspective of focusing on letting other people improve themselves, or just improve the human condition in general, right? So I would say there are a lot of parallels there insofar as that it is a process of self-making and self-discovery.
Thank you.
All right, I guess my turn on this one. Yeah, it's how do I describe this? So, one of the foundations of, or a foundational belief of transhumanism, right, is the ability to improve oneself, to shape your world. I could try to talk a little bit louder, unfortunately.
Yes, please.
Yeah, my apologies for that. So, okay, so foundational belief of transhumanism, right, is the ability to improve yourself, shape your body, shape your world to what you want it to be. As a trans person, there is a disconnect between the physical form that you were given and the form that you wish to achieve. Transhumanism, via just the mechanisms that are provided to you, whether it be hormones or surgeries or a variety of other, or vocal feminization, as JC said. These all work towards that goal of aligning to what you wish to be. I mean,
Perfect.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's foundational to the belief of transhumanism that we're able to improve ourselves.
Thank you so much. So there seems to be an emphasis on the opt-in nature of transhumanism, just letting everyone become who they want to be. But are there any possible concerns with that? I know it's a big discussion in the transhumanism community on the ethics of that. Would anyone like to touch in on that?
I can. So, I mean, we see this with any kind of advent of new technology. I think probably the big one that's going on right now is, or at least recently in my view, is like AI. How do we deal with the nature of these potentially evolving intelligent, currently it's like large language models, but other things, and how do we handle it, and do we need to curtail it? And so there are, I briefly mentioned like ethical concerns around like, are we building like a post-human, and what does that mean? Like, how do we handle if we literally escalate to a point of having a different species? And it is kind of an internal like discussion a lot of transhumanists have within the community of how do we handle this. But we definitely heavily emphasize it is better to work with technology as much as possible as we can, rather than try and curtail it and be like, no, we need to like, but batten down the hatches, shut everything down, and figure it out beforehand. No, like technology is going to constantly improve no matter what, and so we might as well have like a symbiotic evolve alongside it as it goes, and to the best of our ability, instead of trying to keep the lid on it, in a sense.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I have some kind of.
Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I have some like ethics nerd perspectives on this, right? Because like there are a lot of people in our community, because there's a shared ethical foundation for the movement, but there's still a great deal of disagreement within it because it's a very big tent movement. Like really, it's a very big tent. So generally in our group, we try to make it so that we really only focus on the things that bring people together, and we try to avoid any super divisive portions of that discussion space. But like from an ethics nerd perspective, one of the really big conversations that we tend to have a lot there is the difficulty in being prescriptive with interventions for ethics, because it's very easy to be like, wow, this thing is bad and people are using it in bad ways. And then very frequently you'll get this idea that like, hey, we should put a stop to that. But then any efforts to do that can run into second and third order consequences, because you are dealing with there's like 8 billion humans on this planet now, and each one of them is their own very intelligent agent making its own plans and stuff. And so it's like a lot of the times before you try prescribing anything, you got to stop and go, is this attempt to influence people's behavior or get them to stop doing bad things, is going to be worse than if you hadn't done that? Or if there's the soft interventions versus hard interventions, and like you really got to weigh that up. One cool thing though is one part of the established transhumanist ethics canon is V was hinting at this, the idea of the proactionary principle over the precautionary principle. It's very traditional in most ethics to use the precautionary principle for making decisions. And so it's like, new capability X just came online, and no one can do this until we can prove it safe, right? We're gonna take a stance on don't do it until you can prove it safe. And in transhumanism, this is something that is very frequently argued against, because there are hidden costs in doing this. There's also like a sort of baked-in stasis to this, right? Like, if you can't do something until you can prove it safe, then you can't prove it safe until you can do it. And then you can't do it until you can prove it safe. And so it's like this circular logic. And at the risk of getting slightly political myself, if you do look at technology politics right now, you look at genetically modified organisms, you look at nuclear power, like golden rice and nuclear power, and it's like, wow, there's all this climate change around. If only there was some, infinite source of clean energy. And it turns out that the application of the precautionary principle with nuclear power has like severely impacted everyone's well-being, right? So there's your rundown on like sort of some cool, interesting parts in transhumanist ethics, I guess.
So basically, we need pioneers to explore and try all this stuff, to find out if it's safe in advance before we can make it more widespread. Basically, someone has to start it. Yes.
Triage exactly. Also, right? So like if you're going to do something that's risky, you don't just do the risky thing. You get all your supplies and all your stuff you could use to possibly fix what goes wrong. You get all that stuff as close to the site of the experiment as possible, and if it does blow up, everybody goes in and tries to fix it.
Right. Go ahead.
It's actually kind of fun, because if you look at history, if you look at, say, the Victorian era, you find a lot less of a cautionary
quiet.
approach. So, and you find that to be a very... Alright, so I was actually saying, so if you look at, say, just to pull a historical context on this, right? If you look at, say, the Victorian era, you find a lot less of a cautionary approach, but you find a fair number of inventions that we use today, such as, your modern refrigerations.
And
everything
it broken
actually stem
again.
from that era.
What the fuck?
Now it's working again.
Now it's hit or miss.
Oh, that's lovely.
Oh, well.
I think a lot of the fear and the hesitation regarding transhumanism is basically based in misunderstanding. But there is a transhumanist manifesto that exists. Are you willing and able to share any of the points from that?
I actually have it up. I was going to read a few lines from it, if that's okay. Just give a general, yeah. So let me make sure I have this up here. So just a couple lines. So the movement has been around for a long time. Like it's been, like the original Transhumanist manifesto was written in the 80s. But let's see. Am I coming through clear on the mic? I'll make sure if I have to speak loud, I
You
will.
are.
Yeah,
You're doing great.
You're good.
Okay. I'll give a couple snippets though as an example because it still carries through to today. Transhumanists invent and design with technology and collaborate with the cosmos, perform in multiple realities, automorph mind and body, conceive, innovate, and explore. We are the neo-cyberneticists, utilizing high-end creativity, engineering skills, scientific data, and automated tools to author our visions. We have no interest in focusing on self-defeating thinking or entropy. We are achieving refined emotions through provocative forward-thinking and analytical techniques. We are active participants in our own evolution. We are shaping the image of what we are becoming. We are exploring how current and future technologies affect our senses, our cognition, and our lives. And our attention to and comprehension of these relationships become fields of art as we participate in the most immediate and vital issues for transhumanity, which involve things like extending life, augmenting our intelligence and creativity, and exploring the universe as well. Yeah, that's just a couple snippets of it, but I hope that really conveys the ethos of what we believe in and why we believe in it.
Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing that. Would either of you like to add anything to that?
I haven't read that in a long time. It's good hearing it again.
Perfect. It's very easy to find online if anyone else wants to check it out. So a lot of transhumanism relies on technology and in the advancements. More relevant to us here in VR chat. What would you say? Is there any possibilities of sensory augmentation with existing tech, or what direction that's going in? Any future possibilities with that?
Oh yeah, that's the fun part. Okay, so here's a fun experiment I did. So I was watching some educational videos, and apparently the human visual system is so flexible that if you put on a pair of glasses that simply invert your vision on one axis or the other, and you wear those glasses consistently for the next couple weeks, your brain will realize the consistent transformation that's been applied to your vision. It will flip it at the perceptual layer, so you'll start seeing things properly. And there's this fun little process where you can actually watch somebody's perception shift as, like, for the first few days they're really clumsy as everything's inverted, and then eventually it's just boom, back to normal. And so one of the experiments I did in the really old days of VR, before the Steam VR plugin was integrated into Unity natively, what you could do is you could blit to the screen directly with the camera. And so I decided to take the field of view, the virtual field of view in my Vive, and crank it above 90 degrees, right? And like I was squishing more field of view in through my headset, and I'm like looking around, I'm like, whoa, this is kind of making me sick. I wonder if can I learn to perceive more around me if I like wear this headset for weeks on end? But it was an original Vive, and you can't wear that for weeks on end. But I am going to be getting my big screen, so maybe we could try that again.
That's an interesting experiment.
I have it's sticking with or if you needed to.
I could go on about this for hours. You really should go.
Okay, well, I'll take a temporary. I don't know if people had heard of it, but a while back, we already have, like, playing around with some experimentation with VR tech as well. Project Galea was a combination headset and brainwave electrode combination, that collaboration between Valve and OpenBCI, Open Brain Computing Interface, an open source literal brain computing interface platform. That would have like a VR headset. They were using indexes, and then I think they switched to Varjo arrows with electrodes on the back part, on like the back plate of the rest. And the CEO of Valve, I recall, like a brief talk, is talking about like using that biosensing data and inputting that and altering and custom tailoring like your VR experience based on your brainwaves. So we're already like pushing the edge of how much more. I mean, even like with upgrades to VR controllers, introducing things like haptic feedback and such, like we're really pushing the edge of like augmenting ourselves as we try and engage more and more with these digital spaces we're creating.
Thank you.
Oh, me?
Do you have anything to add over there?
No, I don't actually on this one.
Perfect. So we only have like a couple questions left. This one is pretty personal. What is your personal journey with transhumanism? What does transhumanism look like for you? Would anyone like to field that one first?
I don't know. I think I pretty covered it pretty thoroughly like earlier, but like I started transitioning summer of 2020, right in the throes of COVID, and then later that winter I got my VR headset, and so I was trying to figure out this trans identity and other stuff like at the same time, and having some issues with the medical system led me down a path of experimenting with DIY hormones and doing my own research, and then just kind of going beyond that, taking the transhumanist thought of how can I progress further, and particularly looking at things like
tiny bit of feedback going through.
anti-aging research in medicine. Like I'm going to start trying an experimental anti-aging regimen, hopefully within the next few weeks. I don't know when my ship it's going to get here, but like, yeah, just comfort with altering my form and trying different things and experimenting and pushing myself to my to my inherent limits and capabilities and seeing if I can overcome them. And that, I've just really kind of stuck with that through my transition. Never mind just from a transhumanist perspective. So,
Thank you for sharing your story. Would either of you like to take it next? Go ahead.
I think I touched on mine quite a bit on the, on the intro and how I got into transhumanism. But I guess just to summarize, I was born with some physical limitations, some motor skill limitations, and I utilized technology to try and improve those. Before, ultimately starting transitioning and everything and ending up where I am now. I did for a brief period of time before that, between like when I was in high school and college, experiment with like the concept of shaping like my online identity and whatnot. So it present as either neutral or as female online, and did that for many, many years. But yeah, that's pretty much it from my side. Yeah.
Thank you.
I've got a fair bit. So personally, I'm going to go really personal here. So beyond my mission to become a cyborg goth girl, as is evidently obvious, I have a lot of
and who doesn't
future
want that,
interests
folks?
and goal. Yeah, I know, right? Like, she's just like me. But also, I've just got so many ideas and thoughts and experiments. So like a really good one is, I was wondering if, because I do a lot of programming, and I wonder if you could use like a sensory substitution device to take maybe like memory management software and like, I don't know, maybe take some of the nerves on the back of my neck and see if I can take the allocations and deallocations and amount of free memory left, turn that into some kind of structured signal vibro-tactile pattern and just run it through the back of my neck for a couple months and see if I can start feeling how much, like how my computer's doing in terms of memory. I also think a lot about, because I used to be really interested in the monoamine neurotransmitters. So if you're familiar with neuroscience, basically, at the end of axons on neurons, there's a synapse, and neurons communicate with each other by using these signaling chemicals that they either fit into a shaped socket or they block a shaped socket. And if enough of this action happens or doesn't happen, you can get these electrochemical signals that will start firing, and then the other neurons will start going off. Well, brains have systems for dynamic stability, right? So like if somehow for some reason you kept your serotonergic neurons just the button down for a really long time, eventually your brain will start pulling those out of service to try getting back to normal. And so when I think about positive and negative emotional states, there are a lot of people who assume that you have to have the bad to have the good. And I think a lot about some of the... There are, in the space of positive valence states that people can experience, there are a lot of them. There is a difference from a certain kind of positive feeling of being like, oh, I just feel warm and fuzzy, but then there are also positive feelings of like, oh, I just accomplished that, that's so cool, or like positive feelings of like, this environment's really nice. And I wonder if you could get around some of those downregulation problems by shifting the kind of positive valence experience you're having at any given time and sort of soft capping the negative valence ones so that you can have super well-being and positive feelings all the time and then you take any of the negative signals like pain signals that may be important and you change their characterization so that they're more like warning signals or check engine lights. And I don't think you have to have this sort of old school, almost Puritan idea of you can only feel good things because they exist in contrast to bad things. And I think that is probably my biggest thing in transhumanism, is what I know about neuro seems to indicate that may be possible, and like someday hopefully I can get there.
Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing that. Brandon, do you have anything?
No, I don't have too much to add on that one.
Perfect. So we have about roughly 10 minutes left.
I was gonna say, I think in the interest of time, because I don't know if we're still panel-wise on time, like the next panel is gonna start like soon. And I know we talked about having like a...
minutes.
Okay, so is it okay if we like close here? Because I have a couple quick things to say, and then just really quick, I want some really quick shout outs to a couple members of our transhumanist group. Our current group leader, Death, who's in the audience, like has been holding the group together and running events and instances, and we're really glad to have him spearheading our group, and we have things like game nights and meetups and other things. I also want to give a quick shout out to Enigma. Enigma has been doing things like interviewing several of our members, putting those up on YouTube. I think he was in the audience, and spearheading a lot of our other events as well. And a really quick shout out to Safari Monkey, who's in the audience, who helped the three of us collaborate and make this panel. And mainly I wanted to close down because we have transhumanists here within the group, and we were kind of gonna have like a social mixer. If people had more questions, you could come up and talk to anyone who has the transhumanist group in their banner, and get to know us more and ask questions, and see if you want to join, see if you're interested. So
Thanks so much. I've joined the community recently, and I can't wait for all your events. Do you have any upcoming?
this would actually normally be our meetup night. So we've invited the transhumanists to like come hang out at the Academy for Academy festivities. We do host game nights, I think, every Tuesday. Sometimes we will have like our every other like Saturday we'll have like meetups. Sometimes they'll be around a specific topic. We'll watch like a video and then open to discussions. We've talked about potentially getting like experts in different fields to host talks in VR and other social events and things like that. So yeah, we have a VR. We have our VR chat group. We have our Discord. You're highly encouraged to join those and ask questions and get to know us more. And yeah, we're pretty friendly people, I would say. So.
Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm going to cut us off in about 7 minutes or so. But I think you mentioned you guys might potentially be up for a very short QA from the audience. Are you still up for that?
Do we want to try answering some questions? Okay.
I'll do it.
Yeah, sure.
All right, perfect. Just a moment, please. All right, audience. Oh, this is going to be tricky. I have most of you hidden. If you have any questions, why don't you jump up and down?
Perfect.
We'll start right here.
Jump up and down a lot.
AG Rose, yeah.
All right, let me stand up. All right, so I have a lot of questions. First, I'm sorry.
Let's start with one. We only have a short couple of minutes.
Yeah.
You mentioned like modifying, like, I'm assuming when you're referring to like neurotransmitters and like editing them for like synapses, are you talking about modifying like homeostasis to allow for less downregulation of those specific synapses, or are you talking about modifying pathways? That's my first question.
Oh, yeah, no, that's a great question. I actually don't have enough information to have made that decision yet, because like messing with downregulation could have lots of really nasty implications. It exists for a reason.
Not homostasis just being thrown out of whack and like someone just effectively dying.
Yep, yeah, absolutely. And you know what? Those are the kind of questions that are very important and cool, and also interesting jumping off points for new research. So like,
I'm sorry,
definitely
I'm a
write those
bio major,
down.
That's why I'm a bio major in university. That's why I had to ask.
No, that's fantastic.
Good
That's
question.
awesome.
That's a very fascinating question.
Hopefully,
Absolutely.
hopefully I can put that idea in your head about like how to alter the emotional states that are available to someone, because like suffering's bad and flourishing is good, and like it would be cool and very useful.
I'm not a neuroscientist. I'm a geneticist, so I'm more focused on like modifying like receptors, messing with hormones, understanding how like genes work and how to like enable like genetic diseases to be less prevalent, editing like terminator and activator signals, etc., messing around with like non-coding DNA, etc. Yeah, it's a lot.
Hey, perfect. Thanks for sharing that question. It's a very technical and in-depth one. I think I saw some more questions. Do you mind jumping up and down? Perfect. Azia, would you like to go?
Yeah, sorry. Could you say what the Discord was again?
It should be the Transhumanists in VR. I believe our group has the link in there. If not, I can. Actually, what I'll go ahead and do is, if you're in the Academy Discord, if it's okay, if I just post a link to the Transhumanist one, like in the chat, if I'm.
Yeah, sure. That's fine.
Okay,
Go for it.
That'll be a good spot to.
Sure.
I will put an invite there. So.
There is a Discord link in our group info page, but I don't know if it's up to date.
Okay, I will put this in the Academy. Event.
Up to date. I just joined via that.
Oh, cool.
Perfect.
Well, yeah.
Thank you so much.
That is excellent.
Do we have any more questions? We only have about 3 minutes left. All right, Cigar Cobra, would you like to go? I see you.
Yes. My biggest question
No, I can't.
is I'm a huge Sword Art Online fan, and I know VR is like, expanding the horizon. And as a, wanting to get into the transhumanist community and everything, is it possible for our VR headsets to get to that level of immersion in some point in the future where our mind is inside virtual reality. Where we're still connected by our bodies, but we use our minds to control our motor functions in game. Is there any way in shape or form that could be a thing in the near future?
Did you catch that?
Yeah,
I caught
mean,
it. Do you want to go?
I mean, the quick generic response I would say is, even if we don't have the tech now, the transhumanist view is, well, why not? We should try. So, like, we might as well try.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think you're gonna. I think so. What's really interesting is you're going to see hybrid approaches for a long time. I don't think it's going to be a scenario where like, oh, somebody cracked the code and now we can like, I don't know, wiggle neurons at a distance just the way we want, and we have this beautiful immersive full dive system. You know, it's frictionless. You just lay down in the pod. That's probably not going to pop into existence, but what you probably will see is at first you'll see hybrid approaches. You'll see headsets start to shrink, like the big screen beyond, and then you'll see some haptic suits that will come out. People will realize that like, oh, if we want to induce like haptic sensation in a person in a wearable, it has to like actually recreate the forces on the skin. And it's like, okay, well, I don't want to wear this giant mech suit just to play VR and feel things. So people will probably start having like surface level stimulators. Yeah, well, it's gonna happen, right? Because like there's this idea.
A full suit, you're wearing a full Gundam, and I'm like, why am I in this turtle suit? What the hell?
Yeah.
And so people are going to come up with ways of first they're going to go after the peripheral nervous system because it's a lot safer to start tinkering with, right? Like you go straight for the central nervous system, and like then your engineering and your quality assurance and your safety profiles have to be really good or you're going to mess somebody up. So they're going to play around in the peripheral nervous system first, but you will see hybrid approaches where somebody has like maybe a cortical brain implant, and that's just for haptics and tracking, right? And then they've still got a VR headset on, and maybe they've still got like some other wearables for some other purpose, but like haptic approaches that will change until human perception is understood well enough that you can just operate on it directly. That's what I think will happen.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I did see there was a couple more questions, but we are about 5 minutes away from the next panel. So I would like to end this with a question to the audience, more of a one for you to think about. If you could be anything, what would you be?
Dragon.
And that's all I have. It's just something to think about. I just wanted to thank the three of you to come out and join us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, it really was an honor. I appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. 5 minutes.